all right, so this is we're going to start with the Wolfpack real quick. This is the fourth game of the season, still yet to see NC State, run up against, was it maybe the fifth game? I don't even know anymore. Yet to see State run up against a team with like athletes. I can't imagine we're going to see it here tonight out of Bill and Mary.
No, I don't think so. Just you're going to have to wait a few more days here before the schedule really does start to pick up for State. Less than a week from now, we'll have their result against Purdue, which had a big win against Alabama last weekend, and obviously Texas, which beat Syracuse in a pretty close game yesterday. But no, tonight sort of feels like another, just a good sort of like early season, sort of like training camp type game. I think there's been some good stuff so far. You want to see him get healthy. Trey Parker didn't play in the last game. Dennis Parker Jr.'s dealt with some injuries. They've got some other, Mike James is hurt, so they've had some guys missing time. But I think overall, they've looked pretty good. The transition game has been awesome so far. Michael O'Connell, I looked at the stat earlier this week on, I believe it was transition possessions. When Michael O'Connell was in the game, NC State's shooting 87% from
That's
the field
good.
on transition opportunities. When O'Connell's in there, obviously his ability to play with pace and pass and hit ahead is pretty special. I think there are a couple sort of like interesting, I wouldn't paint them as red flags yet, but State, they're really not shooting a lot of threes right now.
That's
under 30%. I wrote about this at Pack Pride this week. They're getting just 17% of their total points through the first 4 games have been from threes. That's like a bottom 10 number in the country. They're not shooting a lot of them. They're not making a lot of them. And I think that stuff will pick up. Kevin Keats has never really produced, especially since he got to State from UNC Wilmington, has never really had a high volume, 3-point chucking team. They tend to take a lot of mid-range twos with that pick and roll spread offense. But they're going to, they're going to need to get that into the sort of the low to mid 30s from an attempt standpoint,
right?
Percent of it, because there's just becomes sort of a carrying capacity type limit that you can't if you can't have a quarter of your shots be threes, kind of, over the course of the season if your opponents are taking more of them. I think State's ability to switch defensively has been able to sort of reduce opposing 3-point rates, but that's also going to get more difficult as the season goes along. I'm sort of again, I think this stuff is going to regulate a little bit. And overall, I think the center platoon of Brendan Humming Hatfield and Ben Middlebrooks has looked good. I think Marcus Hill, his ability, he's not much of a shooter, but his ability to create and drive, he's a really interesting sort of attacking guard. And then O'Connell's decision making, I think has been, really, really good for them so far.
Brian Geisinger is joining us here, and coming out of the game against Colgate, and that game was Monday night, there were 2 things that jumped out to me that were, in my opinion, things that, again, I didn't call them red flags, but I'm going to keep an eye on. And the one you've already alluded to, because I think, forget about making threes. Taking them, I'll use a football analogy here. If I'm not going to throw the ball, not even attempt to throw the ball down the field, the defense no longer has to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to cover it, which makes everything else I want to do closer to the line of scrimmage more difficult. If State, who went 0 for 8 in one game or 0 for 7 from 3, and 3 out of 14 against Colgate, if that's your 3-point, attempt rate, I don't care. I am not even going to play you for it. I'm going to sag in and make other things more difficult for you. I think they must, if they shoot 30% as a team from 3-point range, that's better than shooting 40% on 10 attempts a game.
Yeah, it's about volume, right? And sort of what that volume does to make teams guard you a certain way. And you can see, as good as Marcus Hill has been, he's been very good. like you could see even in the Colgate game, like they're guys when if Hill's dribbling with the ball, like just above the the top of the key or whatever, you can see the on ball guy just like sagging off.
Yeah.
And I mean Hill's very clever, so he was sort of like chewing up the space and just doing his little like herky jerky drive game to get around those guys. But it can make things a little bit more cramped. And also I feel like too, like a lot of the 3-point offense right now is sort of like Jaden Taylor in like, shot hunt mode. And Taylor is, a very nice like two-way guard, streaky shooter, but just like better off the catch than he is, when he's trying to like hit pull up threes off the pick and roll and stuff like that. I kind of still think, I feel like I say this guy's name every time I come on, and I know it's tough to sort of like carve out a role in this backcourt. There's a lot of guys, and all of them are pretty good to very good. But I kind of wonder if a guy like Paul McNeil is sort of like the upside play at some point this season for them.
Gotcha.
Because of his shooting ability too. Like
Okay.
he can do a lot of things on the court. Like he's very skilled and talented. But just in terms of like, the sort of like quick fire, from deep, at some point if they're going to need some of that, I think they have some cards to play. And ultimately, like this is a 4-game sample. Like I think it's going to be okay.
Right.
They've got fours that can shoot, like Styles can shoot. So it's like they should be able to get to like 4 round 1, but it's not quite there yet, basically.
All right. The other thing, and I want to move on to Duke and Arizona tonight, but the other thing that concerns me is that even against Colgate, not a lot of offensive rebounding, just 5 offensive rebounds. And when you start going against bigger, or like athletes, to me, you got to get extra possessions. You don't have to be North Carolina on the offensive glass traditionally, but 5 is just not a good number. They've got to be higher than that. All right, Duke and Arizona tonight. Last time we saw Duke play against high caliber opposition, Cooper Flagg didn't play well the last couple of minutes. He had a couple of turnovers. Knipple had maybe the worst offensive game he'll have all year. Now they play Arizona, who was here last year and beat Duke at Cameron Indoor Stadium. They're going to the McHale Center. What are you looking for tonight?
A lot. I'm interested in a lot of things. I mean, the glass sort of feels like a battleground area. It's a big Arizona team, and they can really mash you on both sides of the glass. Like they clean up the defensive glass. They're excellent offensive rebounders. So I'll just it feels like a big game for, Cooper Flagg. Come on, Malawat, Malik Brown, like the front court, Patrick Ngungba, who played pretty well when he in limited minutes against Wofford the other day. Like those guys have to be strong and physical and, like get good position, but also play above the rim against those guys. Arizona's got like pretty awesome guards. Like Jaden Bradley's one of the fastest guys in the country. Caleb Love, obviously, like, the shot making is always like hit or miss, but you can get hot and just take your entire scheme and throw it over the top rope. And the guy like KJ Lewis is just like really, really good, like one of the better guards. I guess in the Big 12 is where Arizona is now. So, can you contain those guys? Can you keep them off the offensive glass? You even remember Trey Townsend, who's like playing the 4 for Arizona this year, was on that Oakland team that State beat.
Okay, yeah.
Tournament last year, can like really post up and face up and do stuff with the ball too. But for me, like, how does Duke handle a road game early in the season? And what do the shots look like for Knipple? Like, can they get him some good looks? Can you get Caleb Foster going downhill? And just sort of like what are Duke's coverages looking like against those guards, Lewis, Bradley, and Love, like in terms of pick and roll ball screen coverages?
Was it any concern for you that it seemed in the second half that Duke's offense completely forgot the fact that Tyrese Proctor had a good first half? I don't know what usage rates for him and Foster were in the second half, but it couldn't have been high because, especially in the latter part of the game, and I understand why you do it, but in the latter part of the game, everything started with Cooper Flagg and Knipple. There was like nobody else, even on the court for Duke. Was that, let's just see how it goes? or do you think that's going to be the plan going forward?
Yeah, I think it kind of. I don't know. Like I could see it going. I could see it going a couple of different ways. Like sort of like Proctor's an interesting player. He's very good. I've every time I come on here, I sort of talk about how I'm team Tyrese Proctor is good at basketball. And actually he shot it very well from deep to start the season. He's in like a little bit different of a role this year just because, obviously Caleb Foster is there as a ball handler, but those guys, Tyrese has played with Jeremy Roach and Jared McCain and,
right.
And Caleb Foster. He's played with these other ball handlers before, but, they're running so much of this 5-out offense through Cooper, similar to what they did with Flip last season. I think Tyrese is pretty good at sort of like picking his spots. Like I think he's sort of like a natural, distributor. I think he's out there to sort of like make the offense flow and to sort of like set guys up and get him going in transition. And then, he gets into Viper mode, and when the shots find him, then he can get hot. I think you did see in the Army game, he had a couple of big shots in a row, and Duke was like really looking for him. I'll be curious to see, like, the 5-out offense is great. It really opens the floor for Cooper. They've got all these cool movement sets to get to for Khan. Maybe you start featuring Tyrese in some of that stuff a little bit, just so you're actually like scheming stuff up and running some of these like series for him. And who knows? Maybe you just need to get a little bit more like traditional, like north-south pick and roll basketball too. Even if you've got to have Cooper screen for Tyrese, doing stuff like that to sort of like get him matchups and various things. But I think ultimately like Proctor is still in sort of like data collection mode for figuring out like what his role is going to be. In the meantime, he's playing, he's playing very, very well. So I think they'll figure it out. But yeah, maybe you just need to sort of like get to a few more, like either kind of get to the spread pick and roll stuff or start running a little bit more of the 5-out actions, with Proctor in mind as a target.
Yeah, Duke's also not getting to the free throw line a ton. I don't know what why that is. Even in the games against the lesser competition, they're not spending a lot of time at the line. Brian Geisinger, we'll let you go here. We'll try to catch up early next week if you can, before we all carve a turkey.
Yep, that sounds good.
You are the man. Brian Geisinger, go check out Split the Action on Substack. I promise you, if you're a basketball freak, you will thank me for that.